All right, so you're the CEO of a top corporation and you have a lot of money available to you just stacked up in the company as cash. Now, here's the problem. What do you do with all this money? Now, first off, you should know that it is a good problem to have. I mean, there's plenty of worse problems out there. You could have the exact opposite, which is you could be in massive debt, you don't have any money, and then when bad times strike, you're screwed. However, you done a good thing. Why? Because you have money in the bank. So that's really important because when bad times or recession like times or unexpected events do happen, you have cash in the bank to solidify yourself when your competitors may not. But the problem is, what should you do with your money? What are the options available other than just sit there in the cash? And which one's the best choice? So it's actually much simpler than you might think. There's only a few big options. Now, the first one is, of course, to sit there with your cash and do nothing. Now, this is actually much more beneficial than you might think. It may seem like the bad thing to do, but it's actually not done often. And the reason is because people are too tempted by activity. And what I mean by that is that they cannot just sit there with their cash because they have to spend it. You know, when they see, oh, we got an excess of 500 million in our company, we have to spend that. Or that's their feeling. Charlie Munger said it best. Sometimes the best and hardest decision to make is to just sit there with your cash. Because people keep thinking, oh, I don't want inflation to eat this up. I don't want, I don't want to just sit there with the cash because what if there's investments I can make that can improve that? Now, the problem with that is that there could be greater potential opportunities down the road. And this may take years, 4 to 5, maybe 10 years for those investment opportunities or other uses of that cash to arise. Maybe it's R&D, maybe it's a potential acquisition, maybe it's for those bad times when your company industry is just screwed up and sales are taking a nosedive and you need to bunker up and spend money to recoup the losses. So that's number one. Sit there with the cash. Very simple. There's only a couple more. 2, acquire businesses. I mean, this one's pretty obvious, but there you go. Now, this is where people kind of screw up because investing and running a business are two different things. They're two different skill sets. And most people get too overconfident. They think that they can do both, but in reality, they're really good at running a business, but they're not that good at investing. And statistically, most CEOs have failed at acquisitions. Most of their acquisitions have lost their company money or done poorly. So that doesn't necessarily mean you should completely avoid investing because both of them help each other. So Warren Buffett has a quote. He says, being an investor has helped me become a better businessman, and being a better businessman has helped me become a better investor. So how can you avoid rushing into the trap of just shelling out $100 million on a company that goes bankrupt and looking really bad for your business as a CEO? Well, do your homework. I recommend reading the Shareholder Letters of Warren Buffett and everything by Peter Lynch. He has 2 books. Really read these. Technically, he has 3. He has a book for children. I would read that as well. Again, it's not that overwhelming, But once you're finished reading these, you will have such a better grasp of what really matters. And there's a lot of mistakes that you'll see in this book by Peter Lynch that will really help you. For example, he points to like these failed conglomerate companies that started out as in one industry, but they just started buying all these different companies in different industries, and they're just like the most random companies, and most of them failed, and it was just ridiculous. Like this one, like you have a tree cutting business here, and then like a jewelry business here, and then a clothing line here, and it's just like this whole mess. Don't do that. So that's the second thing you can do. And then the third thing you can do is give money, they're technically earnings, back to shareholders. So your shareholders have been with you for like a really long time. Some of them have held with you since the beginnings when your company was very little, or 10 or 20 years ago. Some of them are newer, but they have decided to give you money to be partial owners of your company. Now, they may only own 0.0001%, but nonetheless, some of them have stuck it through with you, and they are owners in your company. Therefore, they deserve earnings. Oftentimes, though, those earnings are never paid to them because some companies never give a dividend. But sometimes, just by the natural growth of your company's market cap and the growth and success of your company, the stock price of a stock that they own will naturally increase, and that's how they earn their money. But of course, you can pay them back even more by issuing dividends or buying back shares. Those are the two real ways of really rewarding your shareholders over time for the earnings that your company has generated. So that's really the two different options. Now, I highly encourage buying back shares over dividends for the most part, because it avoids double taxation and your share count increases. So double taxation means that you're going to be taxed twice, once at the corporation level and once at the individual level, before you even get those earnings. So you can, want to give the same amount back via dividends and buybacks, but by the time your shareholder gets it, it's going to be cut twice by taxes, and they're going to get like a fraction of what they could get. So that's why, just to get more, avoid double taxation, buy back shares. It's generally the same effect. And second is, of course, your share count increases. What that means is that if you own like 20% of your company through shares, and you buy back, 10% of the shares out there, that means there's only 90% of the original shares out there in the market, which means that your cut of the pie, your percent ownership of the company has increased just by buying back shares out there. And of course, everyone's, overall share price increases, which means if you own any of the company, you're going to have a lot more money because your shares are worth a lot more. So they essentially do the same thing. Of course, buying back shares has another purpose beyond just helping the shareholders out. Buying back shares also, let me just do like a circle here. Also, buying back shares does something that dividends do not, and that is you do this when you can also do this when you think you're. So it has to be highly undervalued, and this only really happens when the world is pessimistic, way overly pessimistic than it should be. Again, Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. So usually, let's say like you have an incredible company, you're making tons of money, it's something that will last for 10, 20 years, but some world event, maybe it's a government, maybe it's a war, it's depressed everyone's expectations excessively, and therefore you think, oh my goodness, our stock is only selling for $5 a share, but it's worth $50 a share or $20 a share. We should start buying back because we can get it at a discount. So everyone loves a discount. That's why if you do the proper, research and you find yourself in that situation, it could be a great time to buy back. So that's really number 4. I would call this a fourth option, tucked under buybacks. So those are the main things. Again, there's other minor things you can do. Another minor one is to change your liquid cash into moderate or long-term investments that aren't going to make you a ton of money, but is better than just holding it in cash. And you only really want to do this if you don't think your cash is going to be used in the near or mid future. So you might be really, really, really confident that there will be no acquisition opportunities or moments to buy back your shares that are going to be worth it in the next 5 to 10 years. So you realize, well, if I'm going to be sitting on that cash anyways, and there's no opportunities to buy anything, I might as well, have a slightly higher return with it. So you might invest this in bonds. They're not going to make you that much, but it's better than holding it in cash. You might put it in the 10-year bonds or something like that. So that might do better. And so these are the options. And essentially, once you understand how they all work and why they work and how to do them, as I've just explained to you, then you can look at it from an overarching perspective, and you can say, okay, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. I got 4 really big options. Let's assess the current situation and the future. And it's tough to do, as you can kind of tell, because the future is never predictable. But you try your best, and you think to yourself, okay, I got $500 million in cash for this company. I'm not going to be impatient, and I will actually consider sitting in cash until the right opportunity sets, unlike most people. So that's an option. And you might think, okay, there might be one situation where you're like, I'm just going to sit there in cash because right now there's no investments, but I know that when the right company comes by, that's when I will acquire it. And I know based off how the economy is moving, how industries are moving, that something big is going to happen in my industry. Maybe you're in the tech industry. Oh, I think augmented reality is really going to take off 5 years from now. I'm not going to buy anything now because I think the companies out there right now kind of suck. But in 5 years, there's going to be a dominant player entering the augmented reality and virtual reality space, and they will become the new juggernauts in the video gaming industry. And I'm going to try and acquire them and make a lot of money. So that's an option. Now, so another situation might pop up, and you might realize now is the time to acquire a business or businesses. And that's when you have to have done your research. You should have read shareholder letters, all of Warren Buffett's shareholder letters, Essays of Warren Buffett, which is a book that compiles his shareholder letters into a more readable format. I recommend reading both because it's just a small summary of all of his shareholder letters. You should have read Peter Lynch's books, and you should have a more thorough understanding by then of acquiring companies. It won't guarantee success, but it will help you amongst the masses of fools out there who statistically fail at this. And of course, it will end up being a skill that improves your business skills because these work interrelatedly to help each other. Being a better investor helps you as a businessman, and vice versa, because they're interrelated. Like, if investing is kind of also like you learn stuff about why business succeeds and fails that will help you realign your business skills, and vice versa. Here's another situation that occurred. You might assess all these and you might think, you know what, our company is boring. We live in the coffin business. We just sell coffins to people who have died. even if some new tech game changer comes in and changes up how the entire industry works with technology, which I'm not ruling out, it's a possibility. Even if that occurs, it's not going to be a massive game changer. We're still going to mainly make the money the same way. It's not going to like change anything. It's a slow industry, and therefore, there's no businesses to acquire. Sitting there in cash is, kind of pointless because there will never be a moment to do that. So, you know, some of our shareholders have been here for a really long time, and in the last 10 years, not just 1 year, but consistently for 10 years, we've been making a lot of money, more than expected, and we really need to pay back our shareholders for sticking with us. So we are going to issue dividends or buy back shares. So that's another option. And then in another environment, you might be like, uh, you know, I've assessed the other options, and there's not much I can do. It's a slow industry. Never will there be a time for me to acquire businesses. Um, Maybe I'm going to buy back shares because no, it's not because our shareholders need it. They've already made enough just by owning the stock and seeing the share price go up. But we're buying back shares because right now, it's a terrorist event occurred, and the political climate is really bad, and everyone thinks another Great Depression is going to hit. But our company is sailing. Our company is doing really well. It will do even better 10 years from now, and even better 20 years from now. But everyone in the market is highly undervaluing this company and being very pessimistic and expressing that by the share price. But I know this company is worth 10 times what the share price is now. We're going to buy back shares because we're getting ownership of our company at a discounted price too. So of course there's other variations of this. Maybe you're buying back shares, and it's not really a depression, and you're also actually considering acquisitions as well because there may be something coming up in the future. So you might spend, half of the 500 million buying back shares because you want to be safe, and you don't really know how undervalued it is, and you don't want to be buying it for less of a discount than you thought. And you're also saving some money to be trigger ready when this new business is ready to be acquired. Now, of course, the final thing I want to say is, of course, to cash. Cash is great because it is liquid, and liquid means that it's trigger ready. You can spend it anytime you want on anything and immediately get what you're looking for. Just like having cash under your bed, you can take it out very quickly and spend it on food. You can do the same when you have cash in a bank. Now, if you put it into illiquid forms, like those mid to long term investments like bonds or real estate, the problem with that is it's illiquid, which means it takes much longer to convert it into a form where you can immediately spend it. So just keep that in mind when you're considering the fifth option, which is turning this cash into, mid to long term government bonds or some type of moderate investment that's not going to make that much money, but is better than keeping it in cash. And so think of the long term. Always think of the long term. If you keep this in cash, right, but you may be doing worse than putting into bonds for the first 5 years. But then you know that after 5 years there's going to be this incredible company that you're going to acquire. Then that return on investment from that company is going to surpass keeping it in investments for 10 years or 20 years because the bonds can only return so much, but companies can skyrocket. So that's just an example. Maybe you don't have to wait 5 years. Maybe it's like 2 years until the opportunity arises. But think long term. I think, again, as I mentioned, most people are too tempted. They're too trigger ready to keep it in cash. It makes them antsy. It's very tough for them, even though it's the right thing to do sometimes, to just sit there with their cash. And it's tough because they see inflation eat away at this cash. But you have to think long term. Sometimes this is the best decision because you're waiting, you're trigger ready. you have that liquid cash to spend on an investment or on something else like research and development, potential acquisitions, or to hold up for bad economic times, and you can save the company, and you can, revolutionize your industry. And you can't do that with illiquid investments sometimes, because they're illiquid and it takes sometimes years to convert them back from bonds or, real estate to something that's liquid and spendable quickly. So that's essentially it. Hopefully, this will help you as a CEO decide what to do. Of course, this is a problem that Steve Jobs struggled with, and others have. Steve Jobs, his company Apple, at one point had a ton of cash in. He wasn't sure what to do with it, so he called Warren Buffett for advice. And of course, most of this is stuff I learned from Warren Buffett. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Hopefully, it helped you. And subscribe. Of course, I'm going to be uploading this onto my secondary YouTube channel. My primary YouTube channel is more so personal development focused, and that one is youtube.com/willyoulaugh. But maybe I'll upload it onto my primary and secondary.